is why doesn't somebody fight the drug price situation, meaning equalization? There's a term, it's called equalization. Nobody wants to mention that term. And I'm not knocking the drug companies. I'm really more knocking the countries than the drug companies, because they're forced to do things. But the drug lobby is the strongest lobby in this country, they say, the drug lobby. It's between that and lawyers. And they have a lot of power. But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And we're no longer...
All right, President Trump, they're talking about a pause, a 90-day pause between the U.S. and China, not raising tariffs at the moment, but basically saying opening China markets to the U.S. He's getting into the issue of keeping drug prices down here in this country. So we're going to hit pause, take a quick break. We'll pick it right back up and hear what he's going to talk about when he talks about these drug prices. We'll be right back.
You're watching Scripps News, part of the Scripps News Group.
Welcome back to Scripps News. In the White House, President Trump and Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are talking about an executive order which talks about a drug prescription pricing plan where they expect the U.S. to pay no more than any other country does for prescription drugs. So let's listen in.
That's what we're going to equalize. We're all going to pay the same. We're going to pay what Europe's going to pay. We're going to all pay. Now, there may be some countries in dire need, and I would be willing to sacrifice that, but and help them. But it's called Most Favored Nation. We are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world. We will get whoever is paying the lowest price. That's the price that we're going to get. So remember, whoever is paying the lowest price, we will look at that price and we will say that's the price we're going to pay. Most favored nations, that's what it is. One breast cancer drug costs Americans over $16,000 per bottle, but the same drug from the same factory, manufactured by the same company, is 1/6 that price in Australia and 1/10 that price in Sweden. 1/10 for the identical product. A common asthma drug costs almost $500 here in America, but costs less than $40 in the United Kingdom. So $40 in the United Kingdom, which is where this gentleman told me he paid a small amount for his shot. But think of that. So $40 versus $500 here. That's not even bad. There are much worse examples. And the weight loss drug, Ozempic, costs 10 times more in the United States than in the rest of the developed world. 10 times more. Why? Why? What did we do? Suckers. But we never had a president that had the courage to do this. And nobody knew the system like I do. I mean, I've gotten to know this system so well. And I don't think it's fair that it benefits Obamacare. Obamacare is a failure. It's not a good health care. It works. I made it work. I had an obligation to make it work, or an obligation to let it die. I chose that we had to make it work. I had to make it as good as possible. And I had a choice. I could have let it fail or make it as good as possible. As good as possible means it was still not very good, but it survived. And we did the right thing. But this makes everything work. And I don't want to have a bad form of health care work because of the fact I was able to cut drug prices by 80 or 90%. So we're going to maybe come up with something. I think this gives the Republicans a chance to actually do a health care that's much better than Obamacare and for less money, which if you guys would work on that along with Congress. But I do want to say that Democrats could have done this a long time ago. They have fought like hell for the drug companies, and they knew they were doing the wrong thing. And it's going to be very hard. I was just telling the leader and the speaker that it's going to be very hard for the Democrats to vote against the one big, beautiful deal. The greatest tax cuts in history, greatest everything, but now you have the big, drug prices because that's going to be included. It makes that whole situation different from a scoring standpoint. I just told them, I called them up about this. I said, I'm going to do something that's going to be very monumental, and you're going to be scoring. You better tell your people that this is going to score really well. And then add hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs to your list also. But as big as the tariffs are, this is something that really hits quickly. 5 years ago, I signed an executive order to confront this disaster, but only confront it in a minor way. It was a good confrontation, but never to this extent. And it took people a little while to understand a very complicated system. But Joe Biden, without any knowledge of what he was doing, terminated the policy and then pretended to negotiate under a new system. And then you take a look, 5 out of the 10 drugs that he negotiated are now over 200% more expensive in America than the rest of the world, and far more expensive than when he even got involved. Much more expensive than when he got involved. Joe Biden's plan was as you know, because you wrote about it, you don't say it very loudly, but it was a very big failure, was his whole presidency. First, I'm directing the U.S. trade representatives and Department of Commerce to begin investigations into foreign nations that extort drug companies by blocking their products unless they accept bottom line.
All right, using an example of an allergy drug, or I'm sorry, an asthma drug, President Trump said that a drug that costs over $700 here in the U.S. is less than $40 in the U.K., saying that the U.S. is paying too much for drug prices. So he's going to sign an executive order called the Most Favored Nations, where the U.S. will pay only the lowest price for a drug that is sold in other countries. We're going to take a quick break, and we will check back in at the White House when we return. President Trump talking about signing an executive order called Most Favored Nations to reduce the drug prices in this country, using an example of a cancer drug. $16,000 cost here in the U.S., $1,600 they charge in Sweden for the same drug by the same manufacturer, made in the same exact plant. So let's listen back in.
Country, and it's an honor to be a part of it. And I'd like to ask Robert F. Kennedy to say a few words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator in Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, too. I think they gave you $100 million. Yeah. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. We our country represents 75% of the revenues for pharmaceutical companies. We spend in our country $1,126 per capita on drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe. And the drug companies, Europeans, if you ask them, it made no sense what they were saying. America has to pay for this innovation or it's not going to happen. What President Trump is saying to our European partners is you've got to raise the amount that you're paying for those drugs and pay for your share of the innovation. That the United States is no longer subsidizing that. If the Europeans raise the price of their drugs by just 20%, that is $10 trillion that can be spent on innovation, and the health of all people all across the globe is going to increase because we're going to have better products. So I'm just so grateful to be here today. I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime.